we need death to recognize life. And so that oftentimes it will be one's confrontation with death, near-death experiences, some kind of crisis or trauma, or a terminal diagnosis that reorganizes the psyche in a very meaningful way. And all of a sudden, poof, we get a new human being.
Wow.
Because they have a different value system and a different way of orienting themselves in the world, because they've had a direct experiential, back to mysticism and mythic process, they've had a direct and experiential confrontation with the underworld and the gods within, and we call that God death. And that was the very clear certainty in this life. And if there's anything that can wake us up and destabilize us, it's the confrontation with death.
Welcome to another installment of Behind the Greatness by Inspire. It's Luciano here as your host as usual. We're welcoming somebody from the South this time, not across the pond, in the deep, deep South, like Texas. His name is, I was going to say Mr. Price. It's Dr. Price. Dr. John Price.
Yeah, that's right.
John, welcome.
Don't forget it. Yeah, that's funny. No, it's funny. Like, it's funny how awesome that was for a long time when you were training, and how little it matters now. Like it's those great, like, first half of life ego building programs, that there is a gravitas associated with going through that initiation process of getting a doctorate, but it's just funny. I go by, hey, you.
Hey, you. Oh, at least in the house with your family.
Of course.
I just get grunts. Yeah. Kind of.
Yeah, it's equivalent in my house. Yes. Grunts and eye rolls.
When did it lose its weight? When did it lose the gravitas that you say it had?
I mean, really quickly, when I finished my defense for my doctoral defense, I had one of my committee members who was like, great, now you can go use it as a book stop, my dissertation, and go buy a cup of coffee. Like, which is really not true. I mean, there is, like, the thing that happened to me the most was an interior transformation. It wasn't so much that I needed the exterior acknowledgement. And so the process, given that I mean, 50% of all people that start their doctorates terminate after coursework, because when you hit the dissertation, you're really on your own to fend for yourself, aside from the help from your committee. And it can be a very overwhelming process that you're up against all kinds of insecurities and just a whole bunch of insecurities, basically. I think, at least that was my experience.
Why'd you do it?
Well, because I wanted to go to go to a terminal. I wanted to go as far as you can. Like, I started out smoking in the boys' room and like spending too much time in lunch detention, and I became very acquainted with the Saturday detention people, and like the idea of the modern academic container was something that represented everything that I wanted to push up against when I was a young person. Frankly, because I felt very forgotten and dismissed from that process. The ways that we define intelligence, the ways that we understand how we group and organize people, how we guide people through processes of initiation, and how we encourage them and affirm them, how we discover their strengths, how we help them articulate their strengths. That's not exactly in the modern education program. Like they say it is, but I've spent time in schools, and in large part, we organize people based upon something as arbitrary as age, and we set them up in rows, and we make them. We tend to determine intelligence based upon one very key, yet also just one among many aspects of intelligence, which is memory, and the ability to memorize. And so intuition's really kicked out of the sacred circle, and so I say all that because I was an artist and I was a musician. I found my kind of libidinal energy, or the spark, that drove me in those containers. Though I would later learn that I'm actually quite a good student when I put my mind to it, and when I feel like I'm in an environment that can nourish and nurture my strengths and So when I at an older age, when I went back to school, I was like, fuck yeah, I want some of this. And I pushed as hard as I could and wanted to go as far as I could. And so that was more of a personal accomplishment than anything. That's way more than you probably wanted to know about my experience in a doctoral program.
No, no, not at all. There's a lot of touch points there from which we can
Yeah.
branch. Okay, so
Cool.
because you used, in one of the conversations we had, you used the word flipped. And Jeff Kripal, who
Yeah.
is, I know, a friend of
Yeah,
yours,
totally.
uh,
Yes.
and he's been also a wonderful guest on this podcast a couple of times.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Right. Wrote about flipped, but in your
Yeah.
particular experience, there were two that I took out. One was
Yeah.
pretty obvious, and the other one I want to explore as well. But before we go to I'm saying this so that I can remember.
You're
to
planting
go
seeds.
back.
Yeah, good.
Because I'm also
I
one who
get it.
also felt forgotten because my memory wasn't very good in school.
Right.
I did okay, but I wasn't one of those. So let's go back to feeling forgotten too. But before that, just for the listener's sake, if somebody would just walk up to you on the street and say, "Hey, well, I think I know you. Who are you?"
Mhm.
How would you respond?
So I have the rare gift of my vocation being connected with my profession, which I find to be quite beautiful. I think I found ways to string together or weave together my artistic orientation with a professional orientation, and frankly, they've bonded together in beautiful ways that I never thought possible. So I first and foremost say I am a deeply curious person. I'm a devoted student that sits at the feet of reality and that pays attention and observes to the nature of consciousness and experience and people. I think that I've always been a lover of people since I was a very young person, and so I'm in fact energized by the fact that I'm occupied professionally many hours each week by sitting across from somebody as we talk about aspects of their life that they tend not to share with other people, and so there's a painful dimension to that. There's a beautiful dimension to that, and I think that's I can think of very few ways that I'd like to spend my time more than that. I'm genuinely present and is interested, and so I think that does move into my professional life. So I'm a psychotherapist. I am a devoted practitioner of what I would consider spiritual practice. I'm interested in an experiential spiritual traditions. Spirituality and religion are at the foreground of almost everything that I do. So my doctorate is in Jungian psychology. It's a doctorate in psychology with a specialization in Jungian studies. And of course, Carl Jung is this amalgam or signifier of all things that I'm interested in. The Jungian orientation gives me not only a way of understanding the psyche, but it also allows me to have a playground that feels very rich, that ranges from mythic dimensions of reality to music to relationships, philosophy, anthropology, culture, right, on and on and on. It's where all the weird kids are hanging out, and that's where I want to be. And so those are the young said something really quite beautiful in the Red Book that I love, which is he said there's the spirit of the times and the spirit of the depths, and I'm quite interested in both. And so, modern psychology is really quite consumed with the spirit of the times, and I think we get a real honest devotion to the nature of consciousness and to our psyches when we honor the both and of the spirit of the times and the spirit of a deeper part of ourself that Jung called the collective unconscious. That certainly that we are not the masters of our own house. So that's me at a bar, like how's that to shut down a conversation? Like you're like, dude, I just wanted a fucking margarita, like.
Well, I mean, if I walked up to you on the street, I would probably have walked away a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah, that's right. You're like, I'm out, man. This is laborious. Yeah.
No, but it's good. It's good. It's very good because what I want to do is follow up with two questions on that. You start off by saying that you live your vocation, more or less. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
You have written in your bio that you consider yourself a modern myth maker.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So That means I'm deeply attentive to kind of mythic pathways. I am invested in being a student and being consumed with ancient religious and spiritual practices and asking um, questions about how we transform those practices, not just reinstate them or resurrect them, but merge them together with modern containers. Because I don't believe that we need to necessarily imagine that the contextual dimensions of ancient religion are the same as what we are now, the context we're in now. And so I'm deeply interested in asking questions about what is this realm of spirituality that seems to be a fundamental element of our human experience, and how can we participate in it in modern clothing, without sacrificing all the modern innovation and just thinking that we need to be participating in a historical milieu.
Let's add another layer and then maybe parse
Great.
some stuff out.
Great.
Why not? Since we're here, we're diving in the deep end. I also read, and I knew this because for the listener, you also run a podcast when you have the time.
Yes.
The Sacred Speaks.
Yeah. The Sacred Speaks. Yeah. Come and check it out.
I'm a fan of it. So this is why.
Thank you.
This
Thanks,
is why we're
Luciano.
here. It's a great listen. So you talk about suffering a lot on your podcast. And you say, and you have said, and you have written that your work is not about bypassing suffering, that it's about reframing it as sacred.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Why is suffering sacred?
Well, I was just at Esalen, and I was hosting or facilitating a workshop out there, and I was laughing with the community that we had 24 people. It was amazing. It was a great crew. And I kept laughing about, I just want to put the word sacred in front of anything. Sacred bewilderment, sacred conversations, the sacred speaks, so, yeah. What was the term you gave to me? Sacred what? I'm in my multiplicity of sacreds now. What was the what was the one you said?
Suffering.
Suffering. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So first we need to say what is sacred and what is that attitude? What is the recognition? I mean, because the sacred is essentially that which is outside of the profane, right? Then when we were initially talking about the sacred, it was different. It was a place, right? It was set apart like a sanctuary or a particular cave. You would go in there and cross the portal into the sacred. And so within it was sacred, outside of it was profane. And I think there's a very potent element of our mundane experience that can poke itself out, and we can relate to it with a power that tends to bring us into a state of unity with the world. It tends to feel like it reorganizes our personality in meaningful ways. It tends to connect us with deeper parts of ourselves. And so whether it's a sunset or a bird flying or death, something emerges from the plane of the mundane and it touches us, and it tends to bring about a new sense of meaning in our lived experience. And so sacred suffering is a way that I certainly tend to relate with suffering in recognizing that when I look back on my life and I see the most transformative moments, they're not pleasant. And very rarely do I have very transformative moments that are pleasant. Indigenous traditions knew this, and so it's one of the reasons why they created such destabilizing rites of passage, because we needed to have these moments that overwhelm us with discomfort so that we then learn that we can do hard things and we can push ourselves beyond our limitations. Yeah, go for it.
Well, so let me interject.
Yeah.
I think that is why wisdom is so important.
Mm-hmm.
You can't
and hard earned.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, wisdom probably by definition is something that's hard earned because you've gained it through like a bad experience or a mistake or an error or a failure.
Yeah, somebody's going to push up against this. I tend to dig into this a little bit, but I think there's an element of certainly pattern recognition in wisdom, and so you've had to either you have inherently some degree of awareness of the nature of existence, or you've had to go through a lot of trials in order to understand. Again, that's why I use the term experiential spirituality.
Trials. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's talk rites of passage. So
Yeah.
I mentioned two flips that I realized from your story. One is probably more obvious. We'll get to that in a second, I think.
Sure.
But you did mention to me that you spent many years, your life growing up. Oh yeah, here we go. You grew up with women, and
Oh, yeah.
you had 10 to 15 women, family or friends. I'm not sure what it was. I just took notes here.
Friends. It was all, I just had, yes. And from the time I was a young person, I just tended to like the conversations that women were having better than, I mean, I had a lot of guy friendships. I wasn't exclusively, around women. However, I knew early that I was seeking out women and I was seeking their conversations. And something about the dialogue was more varied.
Ah,
The men in my experience seemed to be operating on a pretty flat plane, and I wanted some more variability in the kind of dance of conversation. And probably because I was interested in arts and poetry and
sure.
um, yeah, and I found myself very much interested in women, and certainly now I'm in a feminine oriented tradition of psychotherapy. Where I get to just have conversations in relationship all the time.
This reminds me, you just triggered a memory from yesterday evening. I was sent a clip, and the clip was about 2 or 3 minutes, and it was maybe even less. A middle-aged guy who said one of the best pickup lines that you can utilize is asking a woman in a room, not complimenting her on her beauty, asking her about her,
Right.
asking a woman in a room what she thinks about the people around her.
Hmm.
And he says you can gain so much insight about what a woman is feeling about the
Hmm.
people around her that you'll bring her closer to you. I thought, as an idea, that's brilliant. But
Right.
there is something there. Like, I
Yes.
mean, there is a truth that I've learned that women, especially young women, when when they're young and beautiful, they garner a lot of attraction, good
Hmm.
and bad, and so they have to decipher.
Hmm.
The women are great deciphering tools, so they have
God,
to
are they
read
ever?
people fast and
Hmm.
well.
Yeah. Cunning, I think, is like most men are oriented to power.
Mm.
Speaking very reductively,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
sure,
Like I
sure.
don't mean to position any masculinity is so variable. It's wildly more complex than we imagine it in
Yeah.
our culture. However, if I'm reducing, I'm going to say that there's a power dynamic in masculinity. There's a cunning dynamic is in the power system for the feminine, and so she tends to learn nuances,
Mm.
while the masculine tends to be related to less nuance and more either or. Good, bad, right, wrong, like, don't like. These very core distinctions.
There is an artist, an Italian artist. I'm going to bridge this here. His name is
Nice.
Jago. He's a sculptor. He's probably in his mid late 30s now. Jago, and they're touting him as one of the best sculptors that has come out of Italy in
Oh,
a century. But he's
right on.
working on a project right now. In this project, he's working on the sculpture indoors, and he's only using daylight through the windows as his
Wow.
guide. He's not using any
Yeah.
artificial light. For me, when I hear him narrate this and I watch him do this, I feel like this individual is feeling what he
Hmm.
needs to create rather than reasoning it out. Rather that the like don't
Mm.
like, the masculine.
Yeah.
He's pulling in the feminine energy of the feel.
Hmm.
I don't know.
A balanced human. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Like we're in a mechanistic and engineering. That's in large part, that's what I understand on a very simplistic level. What we mean by patriarchy
sure.
is that we've established our systems based upon measurement, on observation, on replication, on really concrete, measurable form, and we lose out a lot of intuition. And so I don't know, you cross these things across the internet now, and it's like, I don't know their validity, but I sure like this story. So with that disclaimer, I'll offer a story. I heard about these organizations in Japan that will continue to pay their employees as they age out. They don't retire, This image says they call them people that window sit or something, and so the organization itself lets these older folks hang out. They pay them not much, but they pay them still, and so the younger folks get to see how honored you are as you age, and of course a lot of back end changes. Like we operate on that doesn't make any sense because it affects our bottom line. And why would we pay people when they're not not contributing to output? And so this mentality ends up affecting the choices that we make, the way we save or not, we don't save money, the way we spend money, the way we measure our success. And it's a very masculine orientation.
Well, that's a great segue into a question that I had for you later on, but let's go into it now.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, because you use the words pantheon of values. You mentioned this to me in a context of idolizing youth in today's society, Western society especially.
Do we ever? Yeah. So essentially what you're getting at there is that we have the capacity to worship many gods. I'm not making a metaphysical claim about, what these entities are, or if there's one or many, so that's not my beef. In our human experience, we have the capacity to worship many gods. And when I talk about values, we essentially, Plato asked this great question about, do we have ideas or do ideas have us? In modern frame, we might say, do I embody the archetype, or does the archetype take me over and I become identified with it? And in one level that's very relatable to money, for example, it becomes like money, like it's such a power and force of our human experience that it needs a seat at the holy sacred table in the pantheon. And it needs to be recognized as, here I'm going to do it again, sacred, right? Not as something that is profane, but as something that deserves to be recognized because it has an autonomy, it has a will, it has a force, and it can take us over. And so when we don't have this kind of theological orientation where we see that the gods have plenty to say about how we live our lives, and sometimes they do so against our will. For example, when I make sacrifices to relationships that are meaningful to me because I want to make money, or like all of a sudden I'm living out a certain value system.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this time and time again. And not to say that's bad, right? It's to say that you need to be conscious of the relationship that you have with all these values, the measurable and the material being two primary values of our culture. Another god that belongs in that pantheon is sex, of course.
Yeah.
Go on.
Oh, wow. You're just going to leave it there. You're going to leave it. Let's just pause.
Leave it there. Let's
leave that hanging.
Yes. Yeah. It's one of my favorite things to do in the world is like initiate a conversation about sex and like watch what happens.
And just leave it. Yeah. Well, let's, I'll begrudgingly ignore that for the moment.
Yeah. Let it go.
So the other gods, or maybe values, let's call them values.
Sure.
Is I'm using the words that you used. That's why I wrote them down. We don't include, your quote, we don't include death, aging, and decay in this pantheon anymore.
Yeah. Totally.
You mentioned as a therapist, you specialize in group therapy, but you have patients or clients. Can I call them clients or patients?
Both. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That are as young as 6 and as old as 80.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's aged up. I used to say youngest is 8, my oldest is 88. Now my youngest has been 6 and my oldest has been 96. So it's
amazing.
Yeah. Well, and that's the beauty of this work, when you're able to see inside, behind the curtain and all those various expressions of humaning.
I like it.
Yeah.
Here I am coming from a point of naivete and ignorance. What can you possibly say to somebody who is 96 years old that they haven't heard or thought of before?
Yeah, it's a great question in that we seem to think that therapy is about, I'm going to know something you don't know, and I'm going to give you some information that's going to, blow your mind and have you bring insight into your life, and you'll transform. you'll be fixed,
What? It
and
doesn't happen?
yeah, amazing, right? It just come see me. And it
Sure.
definitely happens every time I see somebody, the truth being, and the truth of this is, the healing happens in relationship, because the deepest longing that we have is to be witnessed and to feel like we're connected. And most of us experience the deepest wounds that we've experienced throughout our lives in relationships. So they take a relationship to heal them. And sometimes what a 96-year-old needs is to have sustained eye contact for 50 minutes of somebody who's looking across from you saying, I am deeply interested in who you are and what you have to say.
Wow. Well, you just answered the question that I had in my head after I wrote it down. And what I wrote down was, our deepest longing is to be witnessed. And I was thinking as you were explaining this, well, I guess that's different than our deepest longing is to be seen. So witnessed is something different. And that's what you're saying.
I mean, there is, I don't want to die alone. I want to be witnessed in that experience.
Why?
Because that is, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind when you ask the question why, the shotgun that just went off in my mind was, why is the worst punishment that we can give prisoners isolation? We have a need to be in genuine, loving, present, attuned, connected relationship. And it's part of the fun. It's part of our essence. And we are in an individualist, largely capitalist, democratic, materialist culture that puts all of its value on self-worth and net worth, and self-worth becoming net worth, I should say. And we lose out on what many cultures in the world, we lose out on the part of life which is honoring and deeply connecting in meaningful relationship. And which is why every single person that has done this project on looking into what people regret as they're dying, time and time again, we see every study that comes out that nobody says, I wish I made more money, or nobody says, I should have raced that car, right? Everybody says, I wish I would have loved deeper and more fully. And that's the wisdom, right? There, back to our initial, right? That's the wisdom, right? Like, and am I going to listen to that? Countless stories, because there also seems to be something inside of us that we need death. Back to your initial question about death in the pantheon, we need death to recognize life. And so that oftentimes it will be one's confrontation with death, near-death experiences, some kind of crisis or trauma, or a terminal diagnosis that reorganizes the psyche in a very meaningful way. And all of a sudden, poof, we get a new human being.
Wow.
Because they have a different value system and a different way of orienting themselves in the world, because they've had a direct experiential, back to mysticism and mythic process, they've had a direct and experiential confrontation with the underworld and the gods within, and we call that God death. And that was the very clear certainty in this life. And if there's anything that can wake us up and destabilize us, it's the confrontation with death.
So I have to share with you, one of our recent guests, her name is Lisa Smart. And we had her on the show because she wrote a book after 7 years of research on people's last dying words.
Yeah,
it's a compendium
all that. Wow.
So she came to it as a professional linguist, a literary expert. And what we uncovered in the conversation is that the unraveling of language and coherent language, like she called it consensual language. Like, we both agree that this means this.
Yeah.
In the final minutes of death or hours of death or days of death is reminiscent to the other bookend, the child learning language.
Yeah.
Coming from the world of imagination and now re-entering that world of imagination.
That's right. And like the first words of my daughter were most definitely dada. those are the words of the dying, as they say, because I'm totally joking and making a shot across the bow with my wife, because there's no way my daughter first said that. Her words were much different. They more were like mama.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, we return to, we make that full circle where the clarity of language, this is back to that kind of masculine thing, the clarity and intentionality of our language system turns into mush, because at this point, we don't need our words anymore.
Love that mush.
Wherever we're going, wherever we're going, we're seemingly going to a different place that we can't fathom. At least.
Seemingly. Oh, I like your word,
Yeah.
seemingly. So I'm not going to say that that's a cheat word, because I might call you on it if I think it's a cheat word. but let's go.
Good shout out. Yeah.
Let's go back to the mush. I think we got to explore. Yeah. I think we should explore the mush more actively. Just because we're all going to end up there.
Yes.
And we might be confused by it when we're there. So why not be prepared for the confusion?
I mean, there's a lot of good reason. I love the book, The Tibetan Book of the Dead, because there are a couple sections in particular that really talk people how through their death that are articulating for an individual dying what is happening to their body, because inside of that decaying body is a very conscious, vibrant light that is probably scared and sad and grieving and confused and disoriented. And so if we have the agenda that, hey, by the way, this soul, to use a highly misunderstood term, the soul is going elsewhere. And I use the word seemingly because I have no idea. What I do know, and what data seems to suggest, is that whatever the nature of reality is completely and totally beyond my comprehension. And certainly how I comprehend this reality, which William Blake would talk about the five senses, of course. And he was a mystic who was looking at empiricism and saying, hey, his major quote that gave us the name of one of my favorite bands, The Doors, if the doors of perception were cleansed, we would experience the world as it is, infinite. And so we have these filtration devices that are our sensory system and our brain that filter out whatever reality really is. And what we can know is that whatever's beyond those filters is totally overwhelming to us. Hence the reason why we have the filter. So there's the mush is what many mystics would call oneness, or non-duality. The mush being that which is not reducible to the categorical dynamics that human beings seem to make consistent in our consciousness.
Have you given thought of where you might exist after your body dies, or how?
Yeah. I mean, I think contemplating the question is, so I have a kind of hermeneutic where I want to contemplate those questions and not ever really come down firmly on an answer. So that it's a little bit like a form of play. So you're playing, you're playing with the full capacities of your mind. And, again, like anything I can imagine, it ain't that. I'm very convinced of that. I think that I've had enough non-ordinary states of consciousness to understand that when you disrupt the capacity of your filters and your filtering system, then it is pretty evident that the same dynamic that brings Newtonian physics into conversation with what we would call the quantum level of physics, it doesn't quite match same. In fact, it goes, wait a second, there's a whole entire different element to existence that we had no idea existed. And that'll happen again and again as we evolve as humans. Certainly that fractal exists in us, where we say all of our universal experience as humans is one small part of a very large, infinite whole that we are simultaneously a part of and also observers within. And there's the inherent paradox.
Have you had an experience then that gave you a window, that gave you a view onto perhaps past
Oh
your
yeah,
filters?
yeah,
Go.
yeah. Well, not to get into specifics,
Or to get into specifics.
because and I want to be mindful of that and say why. Because I think it's important for people to hold sacred their most private and intimate of
Sure.
experiences.
Sure.
And so I'll honor that. Um, but say that yes, I mean I'll be a bit more particular than that. I have had pretty radical states of experience that suggest that was mind blowing, right? And the ancients called this the mysterium tremendum et fascinans, which is this Latin phrase for what we would call divinity. Except then the dual dynamic was brought in, which is it's the great mystery that simultaneously terrifies and fascinates us.
Mhm.
And so it's a disruptive force that can take us over. So I've got many examples of times when reality glitched and I kind of saw through the veil a little bit because I experienced things that shouldn't have happened. And of course, the great thing about that is that throw a quarter in a crowd and you hit somebody who's experienced things that shouldn't have happened.
100%.
What's radical about this is we just don't talk about it in the cultural milieu, so we never really get some back to the human beings humaning in relationship. We don't get consensus that, oh, wait a second, your experience is that way too, and your experience. I think that's probably why the telepathy tapes is such a radical proposition right now for so many people, because it's like, oh my God, this is stuff that my friend Jeffrey Kripal's been studying for decades with the paranormal, and all of a sudden this major zeitgeist around the paranormal and clairvoyance and telepathy is in the foreground. It's kind of unarguable, although there are many people that are arguing with it. But yeah, I've had experiences that have, I will say this, that have brought to question my perceptions of reality. And that is what Jeff and I've talked about before, is a shattering of a worldview.
Hmm.
And I've had a number of worldviews that have shattered. And once you've had enough shattered worldviews, you start to understand that that's the nature of our reality. And frankly, that's a lot of the reason why we suffer, because we cling to previous worldviews in order to keep the world as we've imagined it to be, despite the fact that the world is operating upon us, challenging that belief system that things need to remain the same. Because there seems to be some wisdom from the world that's saying you need to let go and move into this next phase, which could be aging, back to your youth priority. Like we prioritize youth and we cling to it and we create industry around it, and we create enormous amounts of insecurity
Hmm.
rather than just talking to people about how we age and how we grow and how we die on some level. Any culture that's not actively engaged in talking about how we die in meaningful ways is not really serving each other. And if you feel uncomfortable around that, welcome to the party. Your discomfort should not be your immediate disqualifier from the conversation.
Yeah.
Frankly, it's quite the opposite. If you feel uncomfortable leading into conversations, discussing and exploring the universal aspects of all of our experiences, then you better take a look at that, because we're all headed in that direction and our religions need to help prepare us for that.
For the purpose of showing the listener that you might be open to sharing a snippet of a story, because we like to learn from stories, and you are a storyteller, myth maker.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't use those terms lightly either when I repeat them, because I believe it is part of the reason why you're on here. What is it that you can share that you think might be giving back to the ocean of to all the droplets in the ocean that we're a part of?
Well, I go on pilgrimage and retreat often. Often I facilitate retreat space. And what can happen in those spaces is that we're pulled out of our routines, and we are confronted with oftentimes our own insecurities, our own anxieties, our own fears in communal spaces around people that are doing the same kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
And we tend to come to terms with the parts of ourselves that are very much active and running the show in a lot of ways. And we begin dialoguing with them, but we have to go outside of our typical routines. I have experiences in um, crisis and trauma that have been destabilizing, and I've watched the slow erosion of um, worldviews and identities that I held dear. And then I look back. It's like one time I moved up to New York City, and I moved an entire apartment into a storage facility. And then I came back and I moved in with my who would become my wife. And what sat in that storage facility is all my things, all the things that I used to sleep around in on that were connected with my identity. They had for 3 years or 2 years or something. I didn't see them. And so what I thought was necessary wasn't really necessary.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I'll mention, and this is all in legal context, um, I have explored a psychedelic orientation in meaningful and powerful ways that has been guided and led by people that are initiated in some not initiated, but some have in traditions that support this kind of relationship to non-ordinary states of consciousness. And I think that that's one of the primary ways that we have, in our experience. I'll name a few, right? So we have psychedelic experience, we have crisis, we have trauma, we have heightened sexual experience, we have deprivation, like fasting. We've got then the other side of it is achievement and success and wealth and abundance that oftentimes people don't put onto those into those equations, but I think they need to be there because that's the archetype of the magician. When we can put form that wasn't there before,
Sure.
those are certainly powerful experiences to realize I can do that. I can incarnate that in my life. I can see that vision and I can create it into a real vision. So I've had a couple of death experiences and a couple of transformational experiences. Um, and I went to jail once when I was a teenager. And so again, those are really fun kinds of experiences where you go, "Whoa, I'm not the master of my house. I stole a street sign when I was like 16." And so they put
Wow.
me in
You went to
jail.
jail for it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
What a lesson.
Just to clarify that, I know I was literally stealing a sign of orientation, and it put me into a totally disoriented state.
That's, that's poetry. Did you write a song about it?
Yeah, I should have. It was literally a turn right sign. It was the most impulsive thing in the world, and
Turn
yeah.
right.
What I think is that we don't remember that those mundane experiences deserve to be nourished. And what I think psychotherapy does a really good job of doing is saying, just like you're doing here, why that? Why do you feel that? Or what happened there? Or, hey, let's talk about that experience. What did that mean to you? Now looking back, what does that mean to you, that your first experience of losing your ability to have choice? Of the state and the power intervening, and it has a lot more power than you do, and it can do with you what it will.
Of course.
So things like that.
Let's go back to that second flip that I had mentioned, because we didn't come around full circle yet, because I was thinking that you'd be coming around it, but we're talking about so many other interesting themes.
Mm-hmm.
The description of that flip, I started by recounting to the listener that you grew up with women, and that you preferred, and then you responded that you preferred the conversation of women growing up. But that's been flipped over the last decade, where you spend much more time professionally as well with men and groups of men.
Yeah, it has been. And it's funny, ironically, it was a message from my wife, who I didn't get the memo yet I was convening men together. I was relating to men. I was connecting with men. And there's there's this fella who was a really influential guy that was the head of a college that I was connected with in Kansas, and we got along really well. He had adopted some kids, and I worked in adoption and foster care for a very long time in early childhood trauma. And he was a fella that his lineage he's from Ghana, and so big guy, huge hands. And we were sitting, I won't say his name, but we were sitting at this little Chinese restaurant having dinner and just totally digging on each other. And I was like, we were just instantly connected. And at some point, he reaches across that big old mammoth hand of his and puts it on my arm, and he's tearful because he's just shared with me this experience that he's had when he went back to Ghana and connected with some of his people, that he didn't really have a lineage with. And so he said, he puts his hand on my arm. He says, "Please do something about the wound in the white man." And I was like, oof, because unfortunately the dominance of masculinity in our culture has really disrupted our questioning about what stories we do attend to. What's our myth?
Mm.
And we don't ask questions about that because men, in large part, have defined ourselves by what we're not. Because there's a dominant orientation in our culture. I'm speaking purely for the West here in the United States. But men have not had to query who we are. Feminism has been around for a long time. And because women have been subjugated and kicked out of the meaningful conversations, they've had to have deeply meaningful conversations in private and explore what it means to be a woman, what it means to be part of the feminine, what it means to be a girl. And men we just imagine that we know it, and we don't create any of those opportunities to push up against something. I say it a lot, and I get in trouble for saying stuff like this, but I facilitate a men's group with a beloved friend, and so much more than a friend, but just a really important man in my life who's a Jungian analyst. He's a gay man, and we facilitate men's groups together. And it's deeply important to bring all these different types together. However, sometimes I get a bit envious, and this is where I get in trouble. But hear me out. The coming out process for somebody who is gay is hard, is unfortunate, is sad. However, there's a part of it, the reason why we call it coming out is because you're emerging. Ostensibly, you're going to emerge from this process more clear of who you really are, because you knew you were different growing up and you didn't quite fit in the cultural milieu in the way that everybody else did. And you had to ask deep questions about who you genuinely are. And so the coming out process means you had to go through a rite of passage to emerge, to sacrifice, to choose your own autonomy and independence over what the neighbors think. And a lot of times I think that gay people, women, certainly, it's changing for women just because there's so many beautiful and amazing things that women are doing now. They're coming out. They've got a voice, right? There's a lot of a sea change. And of course, unfortunately for men, that's leaving a lot of men very disconnected because men don't know how to orient, because men have held a very limited understanding about who they are and how they show up in the world. And so when that relationship to the feminine in particular is no longer turning toward men, men don't know what to do with that en masse. And so now is the time for men to ask these really meaningful questions about who we are and how we show up in the world and what it means to be a man. So I'm really invested in those conversations.
Well, I mean, the key word for me there is emerging. I never thought of it that way. I mean, a gay man coming out is going through a transformational process where he is sharing and he is revealing and he is showing. He's showcasing his wings, his butterfly wings from the moth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to overly romanticize that.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
There's some
really,
right. Like, however, rites of passage are not romanticized. They are painful. They are. There is blood. It's a blood rite. It is overwhelming. It is scary because it's essentially saying you are ready to be a full, functioning, engaged human in your tribe.
Yeah, well, right. So as a former boy, I can tell you, I had lots of confidence as a boy until the age of puberty, because I loved sports. I loved writing. I was pretty good at school. I was like a quote unquote a good boy, according to my parents. So everything was going for me. And then I didn't grow facial hair as quick as some of my friends. My body didn't grow up as quickly as some of my friends, and I was kind of left behind that way physically. And it took a toll on my psyche and my confidence. And only until my late teens, early 20s that I finally catch up to that. But I lost, like, quote unquote, I lost some years, right? Trying to figure stuff out by myself.
Yeah, that was my question. Like, who are your people? You know, like who are the people around you that were helping you understand your value is beyond your, again, right? Masculinity tends to be about the measurable,
Yeah.
and so size, so to speak, matters.
Yeah, sure.
Size probably matters more to men than anybody else, frankly.
Well, yeah, okay.
And so,
but kidding aside, I have not to make it personal, but I have two younger brothers. When they hit their teenage years, their puberty years, they were more early. They were early blossomers. So it was a little bit more steady for them, but for me, it wasn't. And I took that. I almost took that deeply personally because why me? I took that mentality.
Oh,
but
yeah.
It's the lack, I guess, the lack of a guide or a mentor or a reference point that could help. I don't know, but there isn't. I'm going back to your term, rite of passage. What is the rite of passage for men? What is it that they can?
It's funny. I mean, because on some level, that is one for you. The difference is that you don't have markers that have been established where you cross some threshold, where you achieve some kind of an autonomy. Like you get to the point where you're like, "Fuck you! I don't care what you say about my size. I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good with me." Like you're claiming your autonomy and your authority. And so that's part of what, like when masculinity can be expressed as a multiplicity that transcends sexuality and these really limited understandings of how we imagine ourselves to be a man, on some level, it does involve the purest and most genuine expression of an authentic realness in the world, uncompromising. Right, like I'm not gonna compromise the truth of how I see myself in order to make you feel comfortable. Like that's a different kind of orientation, and for people to claim that, I'm not being an asshole.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be a vigilant, curious student of integrity and discipline and care and stewardship. And I'm going to become a vessel that can orient my powers and strengths in service to those dynamics. And when men come together and ask ourselves, not just posture about who's taller or substitute whatever measurement system you want to put in there, like that we come together and talk about ideas.
Yeah,
and
right.
We come together and talk about who we are, and there's an intimacy that we establish. But I can see something's bubbling in you. What stirs?
Well, no, I mean, really, right on, brother. Is what I really want to say.
Hey.
I mean, it is about ideas, the sharing of ideas, the exploring of your imaginative tools for whatever work you want to get at. So whether it be musical work, whether it be athletic, whether it be writing, anything, math. It's easy to talk about this when we're middle-aged and we have battle scars and we have kids and we're a little bit more wise. When I see 20-year-olds, I see myself.
Yeah.
And I scream on the inside for wanting that 20-year-old to be better than I was at 20. Yeah. Regardless, boy, girl, doesn't matter. But when I see a guy at 20, I'm using 20 as the metaphor, right? As the marker. When I see the 20-year-old that isn't where he can be, I want to invest all my energy in doing that. I know it's impossible, but that's what I want to do because I know what's on the other side.
Blessings, great, yes. Did you have that? Did you have guys that were advocating for you and connecting with you?
Not much. I mean, I had friends, but this is what it is. So I communicated through sport. I mean, really.
I get that too. I did the sport thing. I mean, what I'm getting at by rites of passage is that we don't have any inherent organized structures that facilitate the process and then that celebrate the change that happens in us after
Okay.
we
Perfect.
achieve the experience, you know?
Perfect. Celebrate the change.
Yeah. That's my dear friend Adele Getty. I interviewed her recently, and she wrote a book called "A Sense of the Sacred." I love. I really this idea clarified with her when she was talking about it because I just loved her book so much. But she's really talking about when you have a small tribe of people, 100 to 150 people, and you all gather because there's four kids that are engaged in their bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, you know, whatever it is, their marker of change. And they have to go out into the wilderness and kill something or find their way back to the village unassisted, or they die. You know, like real consequences, right? We could never do this today, right? Unassisted, they die.
Yeah.
And then they come back because you've trained them how to find water, how to read the signs, how to be with the stars, how to be with nature. And they get back, you're fucking stoked, right? Like you are like, that person has been through something that changes the way they show up in the world and that changes the way that you relate to them. And now they're given specialized access to new levels of tribal knowledge, right? Like what it means to be a member fully functioning in the culture. And we're so overpopulated in the way our city centers function and our social systems function. You know, we can't get these experiences a lot. And certainly people, graduation, sure, you know, absolutely. But most of the time when I ask people about what their real rites of passage were, most of them are going to say the first time they drank or the first time they had sex
Superficial.
or drove a car.
Or drove. Yeah, right. It's all superficial. It's all from the outside. They're influencers from the outside.
Yeah, we chase momentary experiences. There's not some massive shift in the status of the cultural milieu, which is something that we all need to collude with each other to support, because the relationship is the value that truly matters. Back to our conversation about death. If relationship really values, my relationship with other people are my values, and I live that way.
That's what's really important for boys, especially. They need to learn from somebody who has seen death. And so in my family, the people who have seen the people who saw death more often were my grandparents, because they grew up during Second World War. And both my grandfathers were conscripted. They were teenage soldiers.
Yeah, wow.
And they never wanted to talk about their experience. And I remember always pressing them because I died. I was dying for that knowledge. And so any little bit of information, I hung on to it. I still do. Like now I'm starting to become an elder in my family. I mean, I'm only 50, but you know, some family members will ask me, "Hey, do you remember when Nonna did Papa?" I said, "Yeah, I remember." Because when I was a kid, I just asked a question. I was given a sliver of information. But imagine the gates were open and my grandfathers talked at length about getting shot at in Libya, in the desert, as an 18-year-old, being anti-aircraft against his will, being an anti-aircraft soldier in southern Italy, and not liking it, and had the best penmanship in his battalion. So he was the guy who was forging his sergeant's signature for leave, and then was thrown into jail at 19. It's like, it's amazing.
That's a good reason to go to jail.
Yeah, right.
I like that. Yeah. It's better than a street sign, you know?
So much respect for him. But I mean, those are the little stories I have. But again, growing up with people, I'm going to say men in this case, who have been close to death, dying, mortality, disease, difficulty, helps you form a better worldview, and not one so superficial as, you know, driving a car, getting drunk.
Yeah,
so
those serve purposes, you know. And the other thing is that you know, there needs to be a commentary on getting drunk. You know, that there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But that kind of intoxicant used to be involved in a kind of reverie where we celebrate and you know, and so like really great red wine at a gathering of people that haven't seen each other in years is very different than squeeze bottle of vodka on the side of the street with a brown paper sack,
Yeah.
because you get the shakes when you don't have it, like those are not the same things, even though they are the same substance. And so back to the sacred, it's like, well, when you have sacred alternate states of consciousness, you find containers that can support them, as opposed to I'm shooting up heroin on the side of the street, and I'm altering my state of consciousness in an addictive way that's not serving all the parts of me. It's only serving one part, which is the escapist part. Other alternate states of consciousness can serve a multiplicity of purposes, so there's other value there.
What is the most sacred thing to you?
I mean, the first image that comes to mind is family. I did this vision board recently, and I put my crew in the center point. These are my people. These are my people. So, and almost as I come out of that, there's a spiral in that vision board. Healing is sacred to me. Attending to living the fullest expression of this incarnation, the recognition that we are all fragments of divinity in a human form, and to live that to its fullest, and to accept the invitation in life to be a full participant in this gift. That's sacred. Music.
Ah. Mm-hmm. Why is music 6th or 7th on your list?
Well, because it's, not linear. It's a spiral. They're all really close together.
Nice. Get out of that one. That's good.
Yeah. No, music has been my. I don't even know what to call music. I have been drawn to music since I was very young, and so I play music. I live music. I love music. One of the first things I fell in love, many things I fell in love with my wife on. I was totally smitten with her, but I knew I was completely shook when I realized her record collection was bigger than mine. And all of a sudden I was like,
measurement does matter.
Yeah, you knew that size matters, man.
Yeah. She won.
Yeah, she did. She still does. She's got exceptional taste in music, and we get to have that as part of our life, and that feels really, really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it. I'm not going to ask you to repeat it. Obviously, like we're coming to the close of our session,
yes.
But not to sound like a therapist.
No, you get to, man. You're in charge right now.
Oh yeah,
I'm in your container. Yeah,
oh, that's great. That's great. Bill's coming in the mail soon.
Yeah.
You mentioned shattering before, and then the first flip. So this is for the listener. Music was always part of your life. You already said that, and you were signed by a record label in your teens. And
a little after. I was 24. I was 21 when the album came out. I was 24 when I signed.
Okay.
And but I started playing I started playing in bands when I was very young. However, I started in college really touring, and so that was my first vocation.
Okay.
The one that I wanted that my whole life. So yeah, music and art.
Your album, people can find one of your albums at least, Questionably Read on Spotify.
Questionably Read, that's right. Spotify, Apple, all those places. But there's a lot of John Prices out there in the world. Be sure that you found the right one. Questionably Read is the album. Came out in, it's 2001. I started recording that record 25 years ago.
You were a pup.
That's crazy.
You were a pup.
I know. I was a little guy, yes.
Yeah, and you said you had a shattering. Your first flip was a shattering of your own identity when you went from, again, it is beautifully put. You said Dionysian. You went from Dionysian lunatic to someone who is reverent.
I was a total lunatic. Yeah. Yeah, all of a sudden, because I cared about, I'm not too sure when I was in my full Dionysian lunacy that I even knew how to care for myself. I certainly cared about the quality of experience, and I loved friends. But when my son was born, I finally realized what it really was to care for somebody else over and above yourself.
Beautiful.
Which is, of course, one of those experiences that shatters a worldview.
Yes.
I didn't even realize what love was until then on some level.
Good point. I can't believe I didn't bring that up and ask you either, because that, for me, when I had my first boy in my late 20s, and when I witnessed him coming out and emerging, and
Yes.
I thought immediately, my thought was, holy shit, what do I do?
Yeah.
It
What
doesn't matter that
am
he
I
was
up to
6 months
this?
wait or 9 months waiting.
No, it's because we don't. I mean, and speaking of, when my son was born, I had this circle of women that I was, because I was raising him on my own until I met my wife when he was 4. And because that was another shattering piece. But I sat around with these women outside of his school program, where we were just around this little sandbox with all our kids playing, and I was just asking all the yoga moms, like, how in the world do you mom? Because I have no idea. And all of a sudden, I learned how to make ice cube trays, all organic food. That then I was pureeing stuff. I was cooking stuff. I was like, I went full on into it, but I had the great wisdom tradition of the mothers that I knew who were supporting me.
You had a tribe. You had a
I
tribe.
did.
A tribe
I
who gave a
did.
shit.
Yeah, I did.
John, has been fun. Been lots
Thanks,
and
man.
lots of
Thanks
fun.
for your time. This is great to
Oh,
connect with you. What a gift. Years of this as a possibility and an idea. We finally got it.
yeah, finally. Exactly. Well, I guess maybe some parting wisdom from you. Last question. What's greatness to you?
Okay. I don't mean to like substitute another word, however, when I hear greatness, I hear excellence. And so I hear somebody in service to an expansion and quickening of self, in large part service to something broader and bigger than self. Somebody filling out beyond their limitations. And so I think a sense of greatness is really pushing beyond what you imagine possible. But there is an element of service to the greater good of others. Because I think it can be really amazing for you to experience the fullness of life and have abundance and have all these wonderful things. But unless you have people to share it with, that you give yourself in service to others, I just don't think it completes its cycle.
I have one more thing to add. And these are, I'm adding it because I wrote down what you said about an hour ago. We had a guest on a couple of times. He's a physicist, University of Albany. His name is Kevin Knuth. And
Awesome.
he is fascinated by the weird. He doesn't understand it, and he wants
Right
to.
on, Kevin.
He loves the weird. He loves the weird.
Yeah.
And you said, and this is something I'm going to try for a little bit more. You said, you'll find me where the weird kids hang out.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask for more of that
I
in my
know.
life.
Yeah. Amen, man. I know. Give me weirdness. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. Oh, Luciano, man, what a pleasure.
It was awesome.
Thank you.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for your time
Thank you.
and your presence. Really. Thank you. I deeply appreciate it.